On a quiet Sunday morning in February 2008, shoppers at the Lane Bryant store in suburban Tinley Park expected nothing more than another ordinary day of browsing clothes.
Chatting with employees and taking advantage of weekend sales. But within a matter of minutes, that peaceful routine would turn into one of the most chilling,
unsolved mass murders in modern American retail history. A crime so sudden, so brutal, and so haunting that even today investigators still struggle
to explain exactly why it happened or who was responsible. The morning began slowly, the kind of cold Midwestern winter day where the parking lots remain half empty.
Employees gather before opening to prepare the store for customers, straighten displays, organize fitting rooms, and joke with one another to pass the early hours. Inside the Lane Bryant store, 6 women were present that morning, most of them employees who had worked together long enough to feel like family. Some were mothers, some daughters, some friends, all completely unaware that a predator was already moving toward them.
Around 10:40 a.m., a tall man dressed in black entered the store through the back employee entrance. At first glance, there was nothing dramatically unusual
about him except for the fact that he was wearing a dark trench coat and appeared calm. Too calm. Witness descriptions later painted the image of a large man,
approximately 6 feet tall, possibly African-American, wearing gloves and carrying a handgun. The details remain frustratingly vague because only one woman survived the nightmare that followed.
What happened next unfolded in terrifying speed. The gunman immediately took control of the employees at gunpoint, forcing them toward the back stockroom area of the store.
There was no shouting, no panic from customers running through the aisles because there were almost no customers inside yet. The silence of the nearly empty store
made the entire crime even more disturbing. Investigators later believed the killer acted with confidence and planning, as though he had rehearsed every movement before stepping inside. The women were gathered together, terrified, confused, desperately trying to understand whether this was a robbery or something far worse. The gunman demanded money. Employees complied. Cash from the registers was handed over. But what happened after the robbery remains the most horrifying question of all.
Because instead of fleeing with the money, the man forced the women into the back room and bound them with duct tape. By that point, fear must have become unbearable.
One of the women reportedly pleaded with the gunman, begging him not to hurt them. Another tried comforting her co-workers. Imagine that room for a moment.
The fluorescent lighting, the smell of cardboard boxes and new clothing, the freezing tension hanging in the air while 6 innocent women sat helplessly on the floor,
hearing every footstep of the man standing over them with a gun. Then came the shots, one after another, loud, sudden, ruthless. The gunman opened fire at close range, executing 5 women in cold blood before fleeing the store. The violence was so extreme that investigators immediately suspected. The killer intended to leave no witnesses behind, yet somehow, against impossible odds, one woman survived,
to later provide investigators with crucial details about the attacker. The victims were identified as Jennifer Hudson.
Their ages ranged from young adulthood to middle age. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives, and that is what makes the crime feel so terrifying even now. There was no warning, no personal feud publicly uncovered, no dramatic chain of events leading to violence. It appeared random, cold, and almost mechanical. Police flooded the shopping center within minutes after emergency calls came in. Yellow crime scene tape surrounded the store. News helicopters circled overhead.
Reporters gathered in the freezing air while horrified families waited for answers they would never truly receive. Detectives entering the stockroom and
that many veteran investigators reportedly struggled emotionally afterward. Evidence was everywhere, but certainty was nowhere. Shell casings, duct tape, fingerprints that either could not be identified or did not match anyone in the system. Surveillance footage existed, but the quality was poor and frustratingly limited. The killer had managed to avoid leaving behind the kind of evidence that normally solves cases quickly. As investigators pieced together the timeline,
was this truly just a robbery gone wrong? If so, why execute the victims after receiving the money?
Some detectives believe the killer may have panicked and murdered the women to eliminate witnesses. Others suspected something more personal, perhaps a target.
Rumors spread rapidly across the community. Some speculated that one employee may have recognized the gunman. Others wondered whether the killer had prior experience committing violent crimes.
The randomness of the attack made everyone uneasy because if the murders had no deeper motive, then it meant anyone could have become the target that morning.
Fear spread throughout Tinley Park and beyond. Women working retail jobs suddenly felt vulnerable in ways they never had before. Stores increased security measures.
Employees became hyper-aware of every unfamiliar face walking through back entrances. The case dominated national headlines because it struck at something deeply American.
The illusion of safety in everyday public spaces. A clothing store in broad daylight should not become an execution chamber. Yet it had.
Investigators from multiple agencies joined forces, including local police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and forensic experts determined to identify the shooter.
Thousands of tips poured in from across the country. Sketches of the suspect circulated on television and online. Detectives chased leads involving former employees, gang connections,
serial robbery suspects, and even possible links to other violent crimes. At one point, authorities explored whether the killer had military training because of the calculated way he controlled the victims and carried out the murders. But every lead eventually collapsed under scrutiny. The surviving victim provided the best eyewitness account investigators had. The man spoke calmly throughout the ordeal. That detail disturbed investigators deeply.
because it suggested emotional detachment. He was not frenzied or chaotic. He seemed focused.
From desperate robber into something far darker. Experts studying the case noted that execution-style murders during robberies, yet despite the brutality, there was another strange detail. The robbery itself yielded very little. For 5 lives to be taken over such a small amount seemed incomprehensible unless robbery was merely a cover story. As DNA evidence reportedly existed but failed to produce definitive matches, surveillance footage showed limited angles. Witnesses outside the store described seeing a suspicious vehicle, possibly a dark SUV or van, but descriptions varied enough to create confusion. The killer had vanished into thin air.
Between grief and unanswered questions, funerals brought entire communities together.
Some families openly begged the killer to surrender. Years passed. The case remained open. Every anniversary reopened emotional wounds. Online forums filled with amateur theories. Some believed the gunman was a serial offender who committed similar crimes elsewhere. Others thought he died shortly after the murders,
Explaining why no further violent robberies matching the pattern emerged. There were theories involving corrupt acquaintances, former partners, disgruntled workers, even professional hitmen.
though no evidence conclusively supported any of those ideas. One particularly disturbing aspect of the case is how, under dangerous circumstances, the Lane Bryant shooting happened in a suburban shopping center during business hours. The environment itself became part of the horror. People across America imagined themselves walking into that same store minutes later, unaware bodies, long after headlines faded. In later interviews, law enforcement officials admitted the case haunted them personally. Detectives spent years reviewing evidence repeatedly, hoping overlooked details might finally reveal the killer's identity. Some investigators retired without seeing justice served. Cold case experts believe modern DNA techniques may eventually solve the murders if enough biological evidence remains intact. One chilling theory emerged from behavioral analysts who studied the attack.
The act of binding the victims, isolating them and executing them one by one, indicated a level of cruelty.
The gunman could have committed violent acts before or after the Lane Bryant massacre without being connected to them publicly. Did the gunman believe she was dead? Did he run out of ammunition? Or did panic force him to flee before finishing what he started? That single surviving witness remains one of the most miraculous elements of the case because without her testimony, investigators would know almost nothing about the killer's behavior inside the store.
Yet even her survival carries tragic weight.
Pretending to be dead while surrounded by dying co-workers, waiting in silence after the killer leaves, unsure whether he might return.
Fleets. As the years continued, the Lane Bryant shooting slowly transformed from breaking news into a haunting American
verse. But for the families involved, it never became history. Birthdays still arrive, holidays still remind relatives of empty chairs at dinner tables.
Parents buried daughters they expected to outlive them. And somewhere, if still alive, the killer carried the knowledge that he escaped justice.
Because statistically, someone knows something. Crimes this violent rarely exist in complete isolation. Someone may have noticed behavioral
Yet fear, loyalty, or uncertainty may have kept witnesses silent. The case remains officially unsolved.
The Lane Bryant shooting because it combines several elements that deeply unsettle people. Randomness, execution-style violence, lack of clear motive.
It forces uncomfortable questions about how predators move unnoticed through society. The gunman walked into a public store, murdered 5 women.
That reality feels almost impossible, yet it happened. Some experts compare the emotional impact of the crime to other infamous retail or workplace massacres because of how quickly normal life transformed into unimaginable horror. Yet unlike many high-profile shootings where perpetrators are identified immediately, without an identified suspect, the story never truly ends. There is no trial, no confession, no final explanation.
Surveillance images, shell casings, duct tape, witness memories, and grieving families still waiting for answers nearly 2 decades later.
In forensic science might break the case open. DNA genealogy, improved fingerprint analysis, and digital enhancement technologies have Perhaps one day the Lane Bryant killer's identity will finally emerge through those methods. Perhaps a relative will suddenly make sense in light of new evidence. Or perhaps the mystery will remain permanently unsolved, another dark chapter in American.
The store itself eventually reopened under new ownership, but for many locals, the location never lost its shadow.
Others remember exactly where they were when news broke that morning. The emotional scar became part of the community's identity. And maybe not only do they destroy lives in an instant, they permanently alter the emotional landscape of everyone connected to them. The Lane Bryant shooting was not just a robbery or a murder case. It was a moment where ordinary reality collapsed into terror without warning.
A single gunman entered quietly, controlled the room, executed his victims, and disappeared into the cold Illinois morning,
leaving behind unanswered questions that still echo through true crime history today.